Today we're going on a deep dive into Boris Johnson's new memoir.
Boris Johnson?
Yeah, Unleashed.
Unleash.
And this book covers his journey from mayor of London to foreign secretary,
Right.
all the way to prime minister.
Yeah.
And he promises to deliver what he calls the unfiltered truth.
Oh.
So we've got a stack of reviews and analyses here.
Okay.
So we're going to unpack what the critics are saying
All right.
about Johnson's take on his political roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
It's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he's never been one to shy away from a bit of controversy, has he?
Not at all. And that definitely comes through in this memoir.
I bet.
Reading these reviews, one of the first things that jumps out is just the sheer volume of claims that are being scrutinized for their accuracy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Tim Adams' review in The Guardian, he basically calls for a fact checker on every page.
Oh, wow.
It seems like Johnson's version of events often needs a little extra context. And what's fascinating is that he seems to lean really heavily on anecdotal evidence.
Like what?
Well, for example, he talks about seeing graffiti in Portobello Road that said, "Brexit saves lives."
Brexit saves lives.
Yeah. And it's these little personal observations that he uses to support his broader arguments.
I see.
And speaking of Brexit,
Oh, here we go.
it takes up a big chunk of the book.
It had to, right?
Of course. And Johnson being Johnson, he paints it as a triumph,
Okay.
particularly when it comes to the vaccine rollout.
Yes, the vaccine rollout.
But as we know, the claim that Brexit sped up the rollout,
Right.
that has been debunked multiple times.
Yeah, it has.
Now, Jesse Norman's review in the Financial Times offers a very different perspective,
Okay.
highlighting the economic and political challenges that Brexit has actually created.
Which there are a lot of.
Definitely. So it's a real contrast to Johnson's often celebratory tone.
I can imagine.
So we've got Brexit boasts,
Uh-huh.
and let's be honest, some potential Brexit blunders as well. Now let's move on to his handling of the pandemic.
Okay.
What struck me was how he focuses more on personal anecdotes and classical references
Okay.
than on like the nuts and bolts of policy decisions.
Interesting.
Yeah, he even compares Michael Gove's reaction to a quote about Pericles dying from the plague
Oh, wow.
to a scene from Wallace and Gromit.
No way.
Yeah, it's like he's prioritizing entertainment
Yeah.
over a detailed account of his leadership.
For substance.
Yeah, exactly, during a global crisis.
That is very interesting.
Before we get into more of those fascinating anecdotes,
Okay.
let me just remind our listeners to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast
Yes.
and leave us a review.
Please.
We love hearing from you.
We really do.
All right, now back to Unleashed. Johnson's experience battling COVID in the ICU.
Oh, right.
That's a pretty gripping part of the book, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely.
But even his reflections on that experience,
yeah.
it reveals a certain lack of introspection.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He mentions a brief moment of self-doubt,
Okay.
but then quickly dismisses it.
Hmm.
It feels like a missed opportunity to really delve into the weight of his decisions and their consequences.
I see.
And that seems to be a recurring theme.
Does it?
Yeah, he kind of skims over any real self-examination,
Like what, for instance?
especially when it comes to partygate.
Partygate.
He mostly blames Dominic Cummings
Oh, really?
and insists that it was all blown out of proportion.
So classic Johnson.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always deflecting blame
Right.
and downplaying the gravity of the situation.
Uh-huh.
He even blames David Cameron
For what?
for not having a Brexit plan in place,
Oh, come on.
as if Johnson himself played no part in that whole process.
Right.
It's like he's constantly trying to cast himself as the hero,
I was just thinking that.
battling against the odds.
Yeah.
This reminds me of his earlier book, The Churchill Factor,
Oh, yeah.
where he draws all these parallels to Winston Churchill.
He loves Churchill.
He does, it's like he's building on that image in Unleashed.
The Churchill complex.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's this persistent theme that feeds into his self-portrayal as this lone hero shaping history.
Right.
But as Jess Norman points out, the reality of his time in office
Yeah.
is far more nuanced than that.
A lot more complicated.
Very much so.
So.
Okay, so we've got a hefty serving of Brexit,
Okay.
a dash of pandemic drama,
Right.
and a whole lot of Boris playing the hero.
Of course.
What other key themes emerge from this memoir?
Well, he really emphasizes his leveling up agenda.
Leveling up.
Yeah, and he claims it's rooted in his experiences at Eton.
At Eton?
Yeah, but some of his actions...
Like?
Well, like, appointing his old friend Kate Bingham to head the vaccine task force
Right.
seemed to contradict this commitment to social mobility.
Interesting.
Yeah, that appointment definitely raised some eyebrows.
It did, even though Johnson defends it by saying Bingham was super abundantly qualified.
Super abundantly.
Yeah. And then there's the case of Dido Harding,
Dido Harding?
another friend he appointed to a crucial role,
Oh, really?
seemingly because he found humor in her name.
Oh, Boris.
It's this pattern of cronyism
Yeah,
that undermines his claims of creating a level playing field.
it does.
It creates this real sense of dissonance
Right.
between his stated goals and his actual practices.
Totally.
It's starting to feel like a familiar pattern.
What is?
Big claims,
Uh-huh.
selective evidence,
Okay.
and a tendency to gloss over uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
But amidst all the political maneuvering and self-promotion,
Right.
are there any moments of genuine insight in Unleashed?
You know, there are a few glimpses.
Oh.
Yeah, he offers some interesting thoughts on Ukraine.
Okay.
You know, strongly advocating for their right to defend themselves.
I see.
And his critique of Tony Blair's foreign policy,
Okay, wow.
particularly regarding the Iraq War, is quite sharp.
That's interesting considering he actually voted for the war himself.
He did.
Yeah, does he address that contradiction?
Not really, no.
Okay.
He claims to have always believed it was a disaster,
Right.
but doesn't explain why he supported it at the time.
Classic Boris.
It is, isn't it?
Another example of him sidestepping accountability
Yeah.
and presenting a carefully curated version of events.
Exactly.
So Unleashed is a mix of bold assertions, entertaining anecdotes,
Okay.
and a fair amount of self-promotion,
Yeah.
with a few sprinkles of genuine reflection mixed in.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah,
But it's important to remember this is just one perspective
right.
on a very complex period in British politics.
Very true.
We need to consider other viewpoints
Of course.
and weigh the evidence carefully
Yeah.
before drawing any definitive conclusions.
Exactly. It's like reading a historical novel where the author is the main character and just happens to leave out any of their less than flattering moments.
That's a great analogy.
And speaking of less than flattering moments,
Yeah.
let's dive into some of the more eyebrow-raising claims in the book.
Okay.
Tim Adams' review in The Guardian highlights a few real head-scratchers.
Like what?
Okay, are you ready for this? An attempted invasion of the Netherlands for vaccines.
What?
David Cameron threatening to screw him up.
Seriously.
Emmanuel Macron wanting to give Britain a punishment beating.
It's like something out of a political thriller.
It really is. And as we discussed earlier, there's a real lack of evidence to support these assertions.
Right.
And then there's the claim about the Queen's last words to him.
Oh my goodness.
How could anyone possibly verify that?
Exactly. It just shows how Johnson likes to present his version of events as the absolute truth.
Right.
Without any need for, like, corroboration or anything.
And this might have worked for him in the past.
Yeah?
But it's starting to wear a bit thin.
I can imagine.
Now, what's interesting is how he's managed to kind of leverage his political persona into a career in entertainment.
Oh, interesting.
The Rest is Entertainment podcast. They had a fascinating discussion about this,
Okay.
his book deal,
No.
and this whole transition.
Okay.
So his advance for Unleashed was reportedly £2 million,
Wow.
which is substantial even for a former prime minister.
It is.
And if the projections are right, his sales could rival Tony Blair's memoir,
Oh, wow.
which is considered like the gold standard for political autobiographies.
That's impressive.
It is. So he's doing quite well with the book.
He is.
And then let's not forget his appearances at events like the Cheltenham Literary Festival.
Right.
It seems like he's found a new stage for his, shall we say, unique brand of performance.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
He's always been a master at capturing attention,
He has.
whether it's through like a witty remark
Right.
or a carefully staged photo op.
Yes.
But as the podcast host pointed out,
Yeah.
there's a difference between being an entertainer and being a statesman.
Totally.
One relies on charm and charisma,
Right.
while the other demands seriousness and substance.
And that seems to be the core issue with Johnson.
He excels at the former,
Yeah,
but often falls short on the latter.
I agree.
His lack of accountability is another interesting point.
Oh, really?
The podcast actually drew a comparison between Johnson and the controversy surrounding Naomi Campbell's charity, Fashion for Relief.
What does Naomi Campbell have to do with Boris Johnson?
It's about the lack of consequences.
Okay.
So the Charity Commission, they found evidence of financial misconduct and unauthorized spending within Campbell's charity,
Oh, wow.
which led to her disqualification as a charity trustee.
I see.
So Campbell faced repercussions.
Yeah.
While Johnson, despite numerous scandals and ethical lapses,
Right.
continues to pursue political influence and even hints at a potential comeback.
That's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Never.
It seems like he's managed to avoid any real accountability.
He's good at that.
It's a skill he's honed over the years.
Definitely.
He deflects blame,
Uh-huh.
minimizes his mistakes,
Okay.
and charms his way out of almost any situation. But unlike